Welcome to the Grow As We Go podcast. I'm Sam, breathwork and embodiment coach, muse, and self-growth junkie.
And I'm Anthony, your co-host, transformational men's coach, and general question asker.
Here we create space for natural, vulnerable, and deeply connecting conversations on life as it happens, wisdom that I've picked up along the way, and tools to truly enjoy this beautiful life you've been given. I want to appreciate you for being here, whether this is your first time or you've been here since the beginning. We love feedback here, so leave your thoughts and takeaways from this episode in the reviews section of this podcast. This also helps the podcast become a bit more relevant in search reviews. Another way you can support this podcast is by following me on Instagram at Samantha__Charles and take a screenshot of this episode to share it on your social media and share your takeaways so that your junkie friends can come and get their fix too. Hello, and thank you for tuning in. I wanted to start this episode off with a content warning or trigger warning. There's sensitive subjects talked about in this episode, and particularly around abortion. And so just wanted to make sure that everyone listening is in awareness around that. And one thing I would like to say about that as well before we dive into this episode is just the idea that was talked about as we got towards the end around curiosity and how that is basically the antidote to judgment, and what a wonderful world this place would be if we could all approach these sensitive topics and sensitive subjects with a healthy dose of curiosity, and what this world might look like if everybody chose curiosity over judgment. So thank you, and we'll get on with this episode. Welcome to another episode of Grow As We Go. I'm Sam. I have Anthony and Diane on here. And this is going to be our first episode where we are diving into the Storytime series. So I'm super excited about this because I've had this idea for a while, and I thought it would be fun to just talk with your average Joe sort of people and get their stories and learn because stories have so much wisdom in them, and we all learn throughout life, whether it's conscious or unconscious during the process of it all. And just how the ways that stories have lasted for millennia. And we think of Aesop's fables and the Bible and all these different ancient stories that have so much wisdom in them. And people can pick up the pieces that they need out of the stories, which is really fascinating to me. You get what you need out of these stories, and that might look different for you than it does for me, and vice versa, or it might get the same thing depending on all of that. So, don't really have I have a vague plan on what we're going to do here. And other than that, we're just rolling with it. So have fun and enjoy the journey with us. So,
well, Diane gets to be anything but average, but here she is. So
I'm the average of the day.
Average Juliet.
I would score her above average in every category. So
Cool. I think we'll just go ahead and dive right in, unless well, first of all, Diane, if you want to share just a bit about who you are in this world, and I don't know what you what you create, what you do in this world, and how you touch lives.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Diane. I am feels like a loaded question to begin with. I don't even know. I'm just sharing my unique expression as I go. I enjoy um
Like, what are you passionate about?
oh, well, I'm passionate about loving people and plant medicines and alternative medicines, plants, traveling, seeing the world, being present with human beings,
Mm.
um, sharing joy, childlike wonder. Um, yeah, it
Yeah.
feels like home.
What like stage of life are you finding yourself in right now?
Stage of life.
Yeah,
Mm,
I'm just thinking about like, so there's like a sense of relatability, or you know what I mean? Like it's just,
I don't know what you mean, stage of life. Like, I'm the first thing that comes to mind is like the women's stages. Is that what you're? Is that fine?
Ooh, that would be
whatever. That's a good
awesome.
one.
Yeah,
Like the maiden. I feel like I'm in
There
this
nice.
you
like
go.
maiden on the cusp of something else
Uh-huh.
era.
It's a fantastic. I'm so excited for that episode, by the way, where we get to like go through all of the stages. Like that'll be
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
For those who are uninitiated, like and are listening, there are stages of womanhood, and I love that I'm the one explaining this right
Oh,
now.
yeah, go for it.
um,
He's been well educated,
I
so
have, but you all have taught me well. Though the maiden stage is this idea that there's this stage in between, like, um, it's funny. I'm probably going to actually explain it wrong, but the maiden stage is like this. Uh, I say this. It's before the stage that a lot of people see women in as motherhood. So maiden is like haven't entered into that stage yet, and there's like this sense of wonder and play and youthfulness and joy, and that's very much the experience of the maiden from my perspective and understanding. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you
that's
did
pretty
really
good.
yeah. That lines
I
up.
gave 2 thumbs up just now, so great.
Feels aligned.
Yeah,
Cool.
so there's the maiden, the mother, the wild woman, which is often forgotten, and
Mhm.
then the crone.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to share all that, but like you're also my sister-in-law and super important to me. You spend a lot of time with my boys and are super playful. Um, just recently got married and figuring out what you're gonna do in the world and what you're gonna create fully.
Yeah. Life
Yeah.
Life.
on the roller
Life.
coaster.
Well,
Woo!
cool. So we'll go ahead and get started in like thinking or to share about this story time outline here we have. So we'll just get started with the questions. What was your greatest challenge, whether it's recent or in the, growing up much younger, or whatever it is that comes up first?
The thing that comes up first for me is a couple of years ago finding out that I was pregnant and deciding to um, have an abortion. And that was, a more recent challenge, but really integral in like my growth and development into who I am right now and how I
Yeah.
show up in the world. So that's what comes up first.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty significant.
So when you think about that particular challenge, like kind of set the scene in a way of like, where were you? What was going on in your life? Kind of, I guess, like what stage of life were you in? What were you planning? What were you expecting? And what was your world like whenever you found out?
Mm. I was, let's see, it was The year 2020. What a good one.
What a good one.
Go down in history.
Perfect timing, I think. And so it's the summer before my second year of teaching. I'm like at the beginning of what I'm thinking is going to be my career for a while. That ended up not being true, but that's like a story for another time. But I'm feeling like I'm at the beginning of my teaching career. I am a couple years deep in like a loving, supporting, secure relationship that, we've been doing a lot of healing there. I'll speak for myself, but I think, for both of us. And, just like, yeah, really spending a lot of time like traveling and playing and figuring things out and not ready for that. And you know, I still have this thought that I'd like to have a family and be a mother. And I have an idea of what I want that to look like. I think it's like an intentional decision. And so that being thrust upon me was just like, the thought that comes to my head is like, no, this is not what this is not what I planned. So, yeah.
Sure. What were some of your biggest fears?
My biggest fears about.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes up is like supporting a child like financially, emotionally. I think that sometimes like having children is romanticized in our culture. Like it's, oh, let's have a baby and everything is fine and we'll love it and like we'll be a family. And while I do see that to be true, it's like I've always, I don't know, I never understood that because it's like you are bringing a sentient being into the world. Like I'm 26. I'm just figuring out how to communicate with my partner. We're just now undoing our childhood shit. I'm not in a good place to like emotionally support and regulate a child as well, So just like immense fear about the responsibility, like really understanding, like as soon as the test said positive, being like, okay, it's not just let's have a baby, everything's going to be fine. Like this is a huge responsibility. So there was just a lot of fear there about, about that. Not really too much about like my partner or having support, like, I think like my family and my partner and like his family, like I think people would be more excited about that. It was really more about like what that means to me, that responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And like I really resonate and totally hear you on that, like the level of responsibility. And especially whenever you've entered this world of like self-healing and doing a lot of work on yourself and realizing your patternings and just emotional trauma from like growing up and realizing the gravity of like the gravity and the responsibility and the like, holy shit, like I'm responsible for another person's life and like potentially their trauma. And it's almost like you want to be the best you can. And it's like, there's never I've arrived, I'm going to like do perfectly and not traumatize my kids. Like it's the way that it all works, but I totally hear what you're saying, where it's like, I don't feel equipped to even handle my own shit right now.
Yeah.
Let alone add somebody else's.
Yeah, totally. That's the thing too, is it's like, I recognize that every parent in this world is doing their absolute best. I see it all the time. And it was just kind of like this like sinking feeling. Like I can't give my best right now. I'm like barely treading fucking water, like, so what am I about to do? Like bring a child into this mess? Like,
yeah.
you know,
Do,
the answer felt pretty clear when I was thinking about it that way, you know.
yeah. Do you feel like your teaching experience also contributed to that decision and knowing a lot more about kids than,
Oh
the
yeah,
average?
yeah. Like just knowing about their development and what it takes, you know, like what it really takes. Like I said, I don't think, I think sometimes people just make like a light, I don't know, I could be like projecting or whatever, but just making like a light decision of it, like, oh, we'll just, and it's like, dude, it feels, so much more than that.
Mm,
Seeing kids, come into my classroom and their needs not being met,
mm,
not by their parents at home, not
mm,
by the staff at our school, not
mm,
by anyone. It's like it's heartbreaking, it's like, God, I don't want to contribute to that.
mm.
Mm.
So you held a space for yourself in that moment to say, truly, what can I be responsible for?
Mhm.
And how, like, what was the time frame in between you making a decision there? Like, did you feel like there was like any kind of maybe, maybe not, or did you just right away know?
um I definitely like went back and forth with myself a little. My
Mm,
immediate like gut reaction was no, I cannot, this is not a good, decision. And I knew that if I did choose to have the child, like people are like, oh, there's a bunch of options. Like you could, it's like, I'm not going to bring the child into the world and then put them into a system or give them up for adoption. Like that's not an option for me either.
mm,
So, for me, it's like there really are only the two options. Like you're going to take the responsibility and carry this life that are bringing, or, you're not going to go through with it. You're going to get an abortion and, you're going to deal with that too.
mm.
Um, but the time frame was it was rushed because we live in Texas,
Yeah.
and that was so shitty.
Mm,
I didn't feel like I had, you know, the time to really like keep waiting. And in some ways I'm thankful, it kind of like made me go with my gut, made me go with my first feeling. But yeah, I think when I found out I was 8 weeks pregnant, and you can't do it after 10. So it's like, you know,
mm,
you got 14 days to decide, and you find out, and then you got to make the appointments, and then they make you do two appointments. And when you make the first appointment, it's like purely to like confirm that you're pregnant. You have to get like an ultrasound, and they make you listen to the heartbeat for 13 seconds. That's the law in the state of Texas. Well, actually, you can't get abortions anymore, but that was the law. They make you watch the ultrasound and listen to the heartbeat for 13 seconds, like just in case, you want to understand what you're doing. Um, and and then after that appointment, they make you wait 48 hours to schedule your actual abortion appointment. So you got to sit at home for 48 hours and think about your decision.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just yeah, I didn't feel like I had time. you know, um in general, and just, yeah, like the actual sequence of events felt sort of panicked, like a
mm.
blur of sorts, like just doing the next thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like, was there any, I mean, obviously, I don't know, obviously, I imagine that your partner is there supporting in that way. And I wondered if there's any other support or guidance or resources or whatever that you pulled from to support you and be that like kind of guiding.
Yeah.
Maybe
Um,
it was within you, it's not always something external.
yeah, I some of this came later, like external kind of help. I think at the time it was just so like stressful, just really,
Yeah.
really stressful. And my partner, he was supporting me and doing his best. And there were ways in which he was stressed too,
Right.
So,
Right.
um, you know, I wouldn't say like, I mean, he was definitely like there and available as much as he could have been. And I did speak with like um a friend who had had an abortion, like, and I spoke with her and she was able to kind of like talk to me about what that was like and what to expect and like, support me just either way. And then
Yeah.
another friend who, she hasn't had an abortion, but she's like one of my like core sisters, I just knew
Mm-hmm.
that like no matter what I decided, she would be supportive. And so, I called on some sisters, for sure.
Yeah.
And
Do you feel like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, that's it.
Well, do you feel like the challenge was maybe more so afterwards?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard you say like that you had some support afterwards that was more maybe guidance, and you would speak a bit about that.
Yeah. So for me, like, the finding out and the process were like jarring, like traumatic.
Yeah, sure.
Um, Going and having the actual like procedure, because that's what I chose to do, was like, um, it was traumatic. Like, there's really no other
Yeah.
way to put it. And I think, you know, there's this like idea that it's like, oh, it's like this easy, like, it's this easy thing. But when you're making your decision from the place that like I'm making it from, like I'm
A lot of
understanding,
awareness.
yeah, like I'm
Yeah.
understanding the gravity of the situation. Like this is a life, like, and it came of love, and I'm sure of that. And you know, I had parts like, did you think it would be fine? Yeah, sure, it might be, right? Like I could figure it out, surely. Um,
Yeah.
but going and having that procedure is just so like, it's cold, it's sterile, it's not, it's traumatic. I'll put it
Yeah.
that. And, I don't know that I expected that. I mean, you make the decision and you do everything that you have to do, and you come out on the other side and you're just like, what the fuck? So for me, like a lot of the a lot of the healing and like the external support was found when I was like really processing what had happened. Um,
Hmm.
and that didn't come until after, like in the moment, in those like 8-10 days or whatever. It was just so like almost out of body sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm. When you say out of body, like, I mean, people, some have had those out of body experiences or heard of those out of body experiences, but did that feel more like disassociation from
Yeah,
what you were
it
feeling?
felt, yeah, it felt like disassociation. It felt like my um my brain trying to protect me,
Mm.
because it there were some things that I was physically feeling that didn't make sense until I knew that I was pregnant. And so then it's like, now you're just aware, right? You're like, oh, okay. That's why my body feels different. That's why I'm,
Mm.
it's like, you can't unfeel that. Like,
Yeah.
once right? It's like, and so there were ways where I was just like totally dissociating, like, I remember like playing this. We had a friend who randomly lent us this like VR like video game thing, and I'm not a huge, video game person, but in the waiting period, like waiting for my appointment, like in those days, I wasted hours doing that. And I don't care. I wouldn't call myself a gamer, but like it was this readily available distraction. So I didn't have to sit there and feel the fear and feel the uncertainty and feel pregnant, like it was
Mm.
um definitely like during the actual period, a lot of dissociating, and then like consciously choosing to go back and revisit all of that was like my healing journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some of the challenging things that came up around healing that? And like, after you made the decision and then there was like, the healing period physically, and then there comes the healing period emotionally. So what were some of the like stories or conversations or I guess like main emotions or healing stuff that came up for you?
Mm. Um, the first thing that comes up is like, just like this deep sadness,
Mm.
like really feeling really sad about, um, I mean, it's a personal belief of mine that your children choose you. Like I'm,
Yeah.
I'm a spiritual person,
Mm.
and I believe that the children that you have, it's not an accident. Okay. Like
Mm.
they
Yeah.
choose you, and they are here to teach you, and you teach them. And it's like this, you know, that's what I believe. And so one of the like heaviest struggles for me was like, God, this, a soul chose me, and I said no.
Mhm.
I said, not right now, I can't. Um, and that felt so selfish and like sad. Um, I I really struggled with that for a long time.
Mm.
It was almost
Mhm.
like guilt. And I want to be really careful and say, not once, like even to this day, have I ever regretted my decision. Like
Mhm.
I I feel like I instantly knew what I was doing, and like I'm grateful that, you know, I did what I did and that I was able to process in such a way.
Yeah.
Um, but there was this like guilt, to not just about like saying no, but I also felt, God, I felt so guilty about like people that long for children, like people that try for years and
Mm.
years and pay all this money and do all these therapies, and they just can't do it for whatever reason. Their bodies won't do it. And I felt so shitty about giving something up that people spend, years of their life trying to achieve.
Right.
I felt
Mm.
awful. Um, yeah,
There's a lot of grief in there too.
yeah,
Like that
sure.
sadness born
Great.
out of
Yeah.
loss, because that loss isn't necessarily like meaning that, oh, it's something that I shouldn't, quote unquote, have lost, but it's just any kind of loss brings
Yeah.
around grief and sadness. And so, like, there's a certain type of loss that people don't really identify very well, and
Hmm.
that's called intrapsychic loss, which is like the loss of like an ideal or vision or dream.
Mm.
And so I wonder, like, was there something that you had like envisioned as your like desired process, and this just
Yeah,
was
totally. Um, I um I grieved what would have been, right? Like
mm.
I thought about my daughter. I like know who she is, and I've met her in a
Mm.
dream and
Mm. Mm.
in a couple dreams, and she came to me in an ayahuasca ceremony as well.
Wow.
Mm.
And she looks the same every time. I know it's not a mistake.
Mm.
And those things coming up was like really joyful and really painful, because it's like, God, what could have been?
Yeah.
And even at the time, like um, before I had, met her in these other like realms, um, just feeling like, what could have been? It could have been fine, it could have, you know, um, I see babies all the time. I think they're beautiful, and children, they're wonderful, and like having, a piece of you live in the world, like how terrifying and wonderful and beautiful. And I know I want that, I just, not right now was my, whole thing. So, um, definitely like, yeah. What was the word?
Intrapsychic loss.
Psychic loss. I've never
Yeah.
heard of that, but that's like exactly, I mean, you nailed it. That's exactly what it was,
Yeah.
um, the loss of an ideal,
Mhm. And it's a valid thing to grieve and to be sad about. And even if it's, based on your choices, it still is a valid thing to grieve. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's that, I heard you say guilt, right? And I don't know if there's that sense of if you were raised religious or not. But
Oh, oh
like
yeah.
like your
Oh.
boy was also there's that sense of
Boy,
like
was
you
I.
made that choice, and so like you have to deal with the consequences. How
Right,
dare you? Yada yada yada, right? Like
right.
it's like, look, just because I make that choice
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
mean that suffering has to be my lot.
totally. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
raised Catholic, so
Oh, you got guilt like extra heaped on you, just
oh,
funsies.
I came into the world. It was dumped on me. Okay. Um,
Literally, like with water just dumped
yeah,
on top of you,
literally
literally.
by the heap load. And yeah, I mean, that definitely played a part in it, right? It's like, I think that there's this way, especially in the Catholic religion, but in society in general, of like demonizing women who choose to have abortions, and it's like, unless you have literally sat there and made that decision,
Mm,
you have no, right, like,
mm,
I think it's sometimes, people think it's like this, oh, casual. It's like, it's not, I sat in
mm,
that waiting room
mm,
after the procedure. Like, I was with women from all walks of life
mm,
that had to make this horrible decision. And you know what we were all doing? We were all fucking crying
mhm.
because we knew, it's like, how could you say anything about it unless you were there, It's like, um, yeah, it's the guilt,
I
the
mean,
shame.
you said society demonizes women for making that choice. The fact of the matter is, society demonizes women for making any choice.
Or
Like,
anything.
Accurate.
Literally. I
Can't do shit.
retract my previous statement. Demonizing women for doing any damn thing that they
anything.
very well please.
Ugh. Which is this goes to show that, like, yeah, where is it that the choices that you make get to be your empowering story, and like, damn what anybody else says.
Yeah.
So when do you feel like you started to get to a point, or was there a turning point where you were like, you know what, like, it's not just that I don't regret it, but like I stood in some kind of power here.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah. Um, yeah, so in the year, following having the abortion procedure, I would often just feel really overwhelmed with like my emotions about it. And I was already in the middle of actually this 2-year meditation course with a school called I Am Heart.
Hmm.
They're based out of Arizona, and they study heart rhythm meditation. And um, I did a 2-year course, and it was like also an integral part of my healing journey and like who I am today. But it's funny because I say funny, but I found out that
Funny,
I was
weird, not funny, haha.
not funny, haha, funny, weird. Um, I found out that I was pregnant during our like 1 year, um, what do they call it? It's basically like you do the whole year and then at the end it's like you're halfway there celebration kind of like it's like an intense week of like course and then like like a mini you get like a break almost and then you start your second year of the course. So I found out during that like
Your halftime show?
10-day intensive. Huh?
Is it your halftime show?
Yeah, basically.
Oh man.
So I found out and yeah, and then a year later we're doing our like it's our graduation and so everybody is talking about basically what we're talking about their life challenges, like what made you who you are right now, like what is something you had to overcome. And for weeks I know that this speech is coming up and I am preparing a speech about quitting my teaching job.
Yeah.
And every time I sit down to work on it, I'm like, this isn't what I want to fucking talk about. You know,
Mm.
this is not, I'm like, yes, this is an important part of my life. And this is not the thing that I need to be using this time where I have intense support and mentors and people to hear me
Mm.
and witness me. This is not the time for this. I have something
Wow.
else. And it happened so many times that I I did have a mentor in the program. Her name was Dana or Wahaba, we called her in the school. And I said to her one day when we were talking, I was just like, we were like maybe 10 days out from the speeches. Like we're supposed to be like more than halfway done with our like final graduation speech. And I'm like, I don't think I want to talk about this anymore. And she's like, oh, like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, I think I want to talk about my abortion, and just like deciding, to utilize this time and support and the people um, to be seen and heard in that because I hadn't really shared that with hardly anybody, I mean, there's so much shame that you carry from, having an abortion. So that was kind of the turning point, and I used that time, like those last 10 days, to literally be held by these like wonderful heart-led people who had already grown to know me for 2 years and like none of them had even known that this thing fucking happened because I
Wow.
shamed myself and isolated myself and
Mm.
didn't want to. Well, I think I had posted about it a few times like in the class, but I remember like the first day getting up, we're like practicing our speeches and I had told the woman leading, I'm like, I'm gonna switch it up. And she's like, okay. I didn't really say like about what, but like just getting up in front of everyone and like I could not even form a sentence. Like I just cried. I just
Mm.
sobbed
Mm.
about I mean having an abortion and being witnessed in that and like how terrible it felt. And I literally like trauma dumped on these people the whole class period. And like afterwards, everyone's like, oh, thank you for sharing. Like, is this
Yeah.
what your speech is going to be? Like supportive and just like
Mm.
no judgment at all. Just like, we had no idea that you were, having such a hard time. Like, you haven't talked about it. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, it was all by design. I didn't want to, but,
Mm.
um, feeling like after that first day of like really letting it rip, as I say, um, like an immense weight being
Mm.
lifted, right? Like
Mm.
I, it's like, oh, I just shared that story with a room of 10 like really safe people. Like, okay, like cool,
Yeah.
like what else can I do, right?
Yeah. I'm
So,
hearing that you found a lot of freedom
Yeah.
in sharing your story.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wonder where that's fantastic. Seems to be a theme in this podcast.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally.
So you shared,
Yeah, I
and then from
shared.
there you said the sky is the limit.
Yeah, yeah. I continued working on the speech and like got it, got my story kind of down. And on the graduation day of that course, I shared my abortion story to like 250 people.
Wow.
There was like a bunch of, our class and family and friends, and a bunch of people from the previous classes of that.
Mm.
And God, it was just like so liberating. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Lifting the shame and the guilt and naming all those things too, but just, yeah, letting it rip.
Let it rip. Yeah. When you said
Yeah.
it, right? Like there's that sense of, yes, your story, but also like all the emotions that you've been holding back.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of emotions that I didn't even give space,
Mm.
but processing them and feeling them in front of all these people. And then, you know,
Yeah. Well, you've been disassociating for like a year to a certain extent, right?
yeah,
At least in front of people.
yeah, totally. I think like
Yeah.
I was probably only really honest with like my partner and like my one like really close friend that I tell
Mm.
everything to.
Mm.
Um, so it's like, I had some support, but, you know, not in the sense that it's not as lit, it feels like it was like a secret, like I wasn't,
Yeah.
um, the shame was keeping me from, really getting all the support I probably could have.
Mm.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of I mean, in this world and society and whatnot of like social media and stuff too. And I'm sure it's always kind of been like that anyway, where it's like you put your best face forward,
Yep.
and like the way that you present to the world is a certain facade or mask that we wear. And they say you never know what happens behind closed doors.
Yeah,
mm.
that's true.
And yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I think being vulnerable and sharing your story and like takes a lot of courage. And so I want to honor you and appreciate you for sharing that here also, like very publicly in a way. I know that you shared your story with a bunch of people with the I am heart thing, and that I know that was really healing for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, appreciate you. Um, what during the process of like healing or I guess during the process of like cultivating your story, because it sounds like, again, interestingly enough, it was almost like a rushed thing, right? Because it's like you didn't have the whole period because you decided to change your mind. And that's kind of interesting, like the parallel there. Actually, I just put that together.
Yeah.
Nice. Way to
Here we
go.
go.
Hey.
I'm doing it. But so yeah, so it sounds like it was a little bit rushed, but I also wonder if there was a way, um, as you're cultivating and like, what is this word that I'm doing with my
Urgency.
hands? Like, no,
Say it.
detangling the story and like maybe bringing it up and like, putting it into a process so that way you could share it and like
Right.
what did all that look like. And then as you're doing it, I imagine there's like different emotions come up and like different awarenesses around like that whole process for you. And like curious if, because and it's too like whenever I was doing my story and diving into like pieces of my story, there were like more things that came up. It got more fleshed out, and I was able to see different patterns and different ways that like that translated to like how I do other things in my life also. I don't know if that was a part of your journey, but also curious what that looked like, I guess, that process of like creating your story, essentially.
Yeah. Well, the whole like first chunk of the preparing the story was feeling everything that I had been actively avoiding for like like, you know, you hear it said like the only way to grow through it is to go through it, and you gotta feel it to heal it, and like,
Uh-huh.
you know, you hear that all the time, but like there is so much truth in that because you literally cannot even begin to process or look outside of the thing that's happening to you if you are shoving those feelings down. There is just no heckin' way. Um, I, you know, my whole life, I notoriously crammed my feelings down. I mean, you wouldn't know it.
Relatable.
Yeah, I know. Like, if I was feeling any type of way, you would not know it. Because guess what? I'm funny and
I'm
I'm
happy.
like, girl, I know. And it's just, it's so interesting because that experience was like liberating for me in the sense that like I don't have to do that anymore. Like you have to feel these things, you know? And I noticed after even just that part of processing my story, like this shift that happened with me in my day-to-day life, in the way that I operate. Like I now feel everything so deeply that it's almost disturbing sometimes because I spent my whole life, you know, not doing that. And it's like um giving permission, you know, to like to feel those things because you deserve to process what happened to you, and you deserve to feel the like every feeling is there for a reason and deserves to be felt, you know.
Yeah.
So that first part of the process was just absolute magic. Like I was just crying like a banshee in front of people and like wallowing like to my partner. Like, I mean, he had seen me like cry about it, you know, but he's like almost like he's like, what what do I do?
What do
You
I
know,
do with my hands?
you know, for the past like, you know, 8-12 months, I've been giving him the cute crying version, you know, I'm like, it's so sad, you know, it's like, this is the full, you know, wild, chaotic
The
emotion,
wild
like
woman, yeah.
wild woman, like this is it, you know, take it or leave it, right? Like I can't stuff this down anymore. And that was so healing for me, and that stayed with me. Like you know, I can't pretend anymore. It's all over my face. If I'm joyous, you'll see it. If I'm miserable, you'll see it. You'll feel it. And I love that about me now. But it's like I'm making up for lost time, you know? Like I spent so much time. Hee she's so funny, you know. So that was just like the first part, and that was huge for me. That was like big shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a massive release,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
like the hugest. I mean, when you felt that sense of release, that letting it all go, it goes back to something we've talked about in surrender, right? Like surrender is a key element of growth. And so now it sounds like you have this element of moving from like shame and guilt to surrender, which is simply just admitting that what is.
Yeah.
And so where do you see like that new way showing up now that you've kind of gained this new insight or new belief?
I mean, I see it showing up in everything, in everything. It's hard to, it's like I know what I was like before, but it's hard for me to even, I don't know. I just can't imagine. I feel sad for her a lot of the times, you know? Like it's so easy for me now to like say how I'm feeling and like know that that's true for me, and like sit with those feelings instead of like just, I say so easy. I don't want to be like, I'm not so cool, okay? Well, it's
Don't get
still
any bright ideas.
I'm not like so cool, but like compared to like where I was before, and um there's things that are easier to sit with than others, obviously, but like just, I see it in my relationship, in my friendships, in my day-to-day life, like just, you know, feeling whatever I'm feeling, and it's okay. Like, what a wild,
Yeah,
wild concept.
strange concept for people to actually be able to feel their feelings and those be valid feelings to feel.
I
Oh
don't have
my
to.
gosh. So in a world where, sorry, say that again.
Oh, I said you don't have to wear the mask anymore. No, like,
It's so good. I just did a poem with my students called We Wear the Mask, and it's all about that.
mm,
And the amazing thing is, it goes right over their heads.
oh,
They don't get it.
good.
Yeah, well, of course not. Why? Because the mask doesn't feel like the mask at that point. It
No,
feels like all you know.
it's you.
Yeah, until you realize this isn't me.
This isn't me. There's a lot more there.
Yeah.
So, what did you like heal or reconcile within yourself in order to become the person that you are now, like capable of this shift of belief and the shift of way of being?
What did I heal? Mm, it feels like a lot of things, but um, I guess it feels like um, giving myself compassion, where previously I would be criticizing or shaming my way into whatever I was trying to get. It
Mm,
feels like giving myself permission to feel the depths of all of the emotions, and like
mm,
not just feel them, but like really appreciate them,
mm.
I had this experience in an ayahuasca ceremony that like I have this like expression that I say sometimes. I'm like, oh, even if I'm having like a really terrible time, like I'm going through the pits of human despair, I'm always like, well, I could have been born an earthworm. It's like, I don't know, and that maybe that's not fair for me to say, but it's like I I can imagine that they don't get to experience the highs and lows of the human emotional experience, and what a gift that I'm capable and sentient and able
Mm,
to, to feel and process these things. Like it will never be like this again. It's only happening in
mm,
this way for me right now,
mm,
right?
Right.
Fucking miracle.
It
And
is.
it's hard to see it that way sometimes, but um, it's a gift, right?
Mm. And it's
Yeah.
a gift
Um,
that you get to decide what to do with,
yeah,
right? And those choices that you make, those beliefs that you have, those visions that you have, right?
yeah.
What what did you find was something that made you be able to stop just looking at each individual moment, but also create a future for you and people in your life?
Hmm. Um, well, in regards to like my abortion,
Yeah.
this was like super integral for like this part of my story and for the future. My
Mhm.
mentor, Wahaba, I was talking to her one time about the guilt that I felt.
Mm,
And like people really want babies and I just fucking said no, not right now. And I was in really a lot of pain about the soul choosing me and like me rejecting it and like being misunderstood about that, which is kind of funny. But I it was so painful, right? To think like this spiritual angel child chose me and I said no. And she said, can you consider that they can choose you again? And I had not considered that until she said it. And not only did it stick with me, but I now know that that is true from, the dreams and meditations that I've done. And like, it's not a coincidence, like she's chosen me before. She's going to choose me again. I see her. I've smelled her. I know it. I know who she is. Like, wow. So there's no like doubt, and that's really wild to say.
That's empowering to say.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Actually.
It is. I know how it sounds though. Sometimes I gotta give a disclaimer.
Well, sure, but I mean, you get to decide how you interpret that.
Yeah, and that's how I interpret it, And
it's a really beautiful and empowering interpretation, if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. So that's like when I think about how this has impacted me and in the future, what that's gonna look like. I'm expecting her. She's gonna do her thing anyways. When I'm saying yes, when I'm saying a full yes, and I'm like ready to receive whatever gifts she's bringing to my life. It's gonna be a choice.
What do you think happens to our world if more people start to think like that?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Powerful vision to like think this gets to be a place where people think intentionally about difficult things and choose to see such beautiful new interpretation of that. And it makes it so that it's not all about this who's right and who's wrong and yada yada yada. It's about what is it transform in each of us, each decision, each moment.
Yeah.
Powerful.
What you just said reminds me of I called my graduation speech, my title was A Decision of Love, because I just don't see how you could like hear my story and misunderstand or misinterpret that was anything but a decision of love, right? Like that's what it feels like to me. And there was this girl that I was friends with in high school, and social media is funny. People be posting their opinions about everything, and I don't know. I don't take it personally a lot, okay? But I do have some soft spots around like abortion stuff, and she posted something that was just really like, we were close enough friends where I was kind of like, ow, like, why? So I just reached out and I said, hey, like, I want you to know that I had an abortion and this was really sad for me to read. And if you are caring at all to like talk about it, like I would be happy to explain my story to you. And she is coming from like a very religious background. And, I wasn't really I wasn't going into it like attached to any outcomes. I just want, I got parts that want to be understood.
Oh yeah. We all.
That's another thing too. But you know, and she's like, I'm like, if you want, you know, I have a speech that I gave at, you know, my graduation thing, and I'm happy to send you. It's a 7-minute clip, and you know, I'm happy to send it to you, and maybe we can understand each other a little bit more. And you would not believe the response that I got. I mean, she was so like, you know, thank you so much for sharing this with me. It had never
Wow.
occurred to me that someone, it's like, it's polarizing, right? Like, this is one of those
Yeah.
Yeah.
things that, you know, you hear the word abortion, you're polarized. Like, you have a, right? Like, you're over here, and there's no in between. It's, you know,
Mm.
we're pitted
Yeah.
against each other. And she was just like, you know, it I totally understand what you're saying. And like, it doesn't
Mm.
align with my beliefs, but I want you to know that I'm so grateful that you shared this with me because, you know, I kind of get it. And I'm just like, oh my God, you know, like I was I sent that video expecting the wrath.
We are the world. We are
Literally, I sent it expecting the wrath of Jesus
God
angel.
himself.
Sure, yeah.
And it was just like this beautiful moment of like, you know what? I might not totally understand, but thank you. You know, like you've given
Yeah.
me a new
Mm.
perspective. And like there's something to be said about that. Like you don't have to understand, you know, you don't have to
Mm.
do what I do, but you can have compassion. You know,
Yeah.
you can
I
understand the love behind what's going on, right? Like,
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I feel like conversations like that is what will change the world.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I think Anthony, you've said something about curiosity being the cure to
Judgment.
judgment. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's like, can we just be curious instead of judgmental? Can we open our hearts and our minds to a different story? Even if like it doesn't mean that anybody's attacking your point of view. I think that's a thing where like people get all defensive and like they have
Oh,
to
yeah.
defend their belief system when it's like you can have yours and I can have mine
Mm.
and we can all still get along. And like I can see how you would come to that decision or come to that belief or that be your reality. And mine is this way because of this, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I understand you. And like, what a beautiful
Mm.
world to live in.
yeah,
Yeah, it is. There's the interesting, and maybe a future podcast episode on this is the interesting part is when someone's beliefs are not just what they believe, but truly embedded in who they are.
mm,
And so, like, people are like, this isn't just about belief, this is about me. And so, it's interesting to hold
yeah,
that
yeah.
as we think through that because your beliefs changed through this whole experience and process, Diane. Like, what was the biggest one that you were like, yeah, this is the belief that totally shifted after this?
Hmm.
You've given us quite a few good ones already, but if you got one more in the tank, I'll gladly take it.
The beliefs that changed, like just about myself or like about,
Anything.
hmm. I think a belief about myself is just like, um, that I'm capable of like processing, of feeling, like
Mm.
really, really feeling.
Mm.
Um, and, you know, I honestly, before I went through this, I used to think like abortions were the easy way out.
Mm.
To be
Mm.
completely honest with you,
Mm.
you know, I had judgments about that. Whether, you know, and it wasn't in the sense that like I didn't think you should do it. Like I was pretty much always like, you know, your body, your choice kind of person.
Mm.
Still am, you know, but
Mhm.
I had this like, you know, sort of I don't even know if it was mine. It feels like so long ago, but
Mm.
just like, oh, of course, right? Like that's the easy way out. And like going through that and knowing like the depth of that experience and like also seeing that for other women, you know, and like um, it's just not that simple. It's not black and white, it is a lot of things. um,
Yeah.
and yeah, that changed.
So what do you feel like? So I hear you saying that like kind of one of your big takeaways or insights of your journey is like your capability and permission to feel and like just the depths of all of that. Um, do you feel like there is a moral to this story?
Moral to the story. Hmm. Um, well, the first thing that comes to mind is like trusting yourself, right? Like,
How
How
funny is
beautiful.
that?
I mean, I knew from the beginning what was right for me and my story, right? And although it was like a difficult thing, like knowing that and trusting myself and not
Yeah.
being, swayed or confused by other feelings or other ideals or things that were happening, just like knowing like, no, this is my truth. And also
Mm.
like, so trusting yourself and um the literal power of feeling it to heal it. I mean,
Ooh.
Mm,
you cannot, I think people like to process things logically, right? We like to think of things
yeah.
and make sense, and we get our little boxes and we check our little lists and, oh, well, I journaled about that today. It's like, but did you feel the depth of your human despair? You know, like, did you sit with that? Because you
Mm.
can't even journal about it until you do that.
I have to
Yeah.
put that on my next checklist. Like, sit the extent of my human despair. Check. Check.
Wallow in self pity.
I've moved that too many times next week. Oh my God.
Schedule again.
Grinch it up in here.
Yeah.
I love that. Um, so I mean, I guess I have like a list of questions towards the end here, but I feel like we've answered a lot of these. It's like
Mm.
the single core message for the world to learn from this.
Mm. Does that feel the same or different?
I mean, to me it does, but it could be different.
Feels kind of the same to me.
Unless you trust yourself that it's the same thing.
Yeah, feels kind of the same to me.
Yeah. What does the world need to know?
Hmm. What does the world need to know? Um, you never know what someone's going through, and you never
Mm.
know what your compassion and what your understanding can do for someone.
Mm.
Um,
I love
and
that.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Seems like it
Something
would have
like
been a
that.
very different world had you not had the level of compassion that you had in your experience.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and like even originally, like had we lived in a more compassionate world, then there wouldn't have been that like shame, guilt, like all that build
Mm.
up in it to begin with.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't have felt that probably so intensely, right? Like
Mm.
Yeah.
I was unpacking that. A lot of it didn't feel, it wasn't mine. It really
Yeah.
wasn't. It was like my Catholic upbringing and
Mm.
like things that I, know that people believe and say, and the fact that it's one of those topics that lacks compassion. People are too fired up. So
Yeah.
a lot of that wasn't mine. Like I wasn't feeling that, but I was hearing it all the time, and
Mm.
it's hard when things get put on you like that.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, cool. So I'm hearing like a story of self-trust and self-responsibility, a lesson of healing like feeling to heal it, and compassion, and like truly a honoring for this life. And I have seen that shift in you. Like, I've known you for a long time, and so I have seen that shift of like just the gratitude and the blessings and honoring of this one beautiful life that we get. And yeah, it's really a beautiful thing to live into.
There's a beautiful thread that runs through your story too.
I was about to ask, do you have like a story weaver?
Yeah. And every single person's story is like, we all tell stories for a reason. And so even as we're telling the story of our life and all these things, the truth is that there's always a thread that runs through each and everything. And so, like, from the very beginning, your intuition was present. Like, every bit and every moment is like, okay, I know what I need to do here. I know what I need to do here. I know what I need to do here. And you take like step by step by step. And some of that intuition was based off of stuff that you didn't even really know, but you went with it anyway. Because like not everybody chooses to go with the gut feeling, as opposed to that like deep religious stuff that's like at the core for a lot of people. And so like you allowed yourself the space to say like, okay, I'm going to trust that. And so you trusting yourself led to this incredible journey. And you also trusted yourself that you weren't ready to share that story with certain people yet, that you weren't ready to share that story out. And it wasn't until you had a mentor say, hey, I'm here to hold that space for you, for your intuition to say, oh yeah, as you said, oh yeah, I get to tell this story instead. And so like all throughout that entire thing is just like your body, your spirit, just knowing this is what's next for me. And so we can all take a lesson from that. We can all see like where the things that we've been ignoring, that gut feeling, ignoring the intuition, and where we lean into it and celebrate that. So I really want to celebrate you, because a lot of times the threads that get woven are like, man, we really let our shit just take hold of us for a long time there. And this is a story of triumph, and the story of victory and hope and intuition. And that's really powerful. Diane, thank you for your story.
Well, thanks. Happy to share with you guys. I'm happy to hear my thread. I've heard a lot about your threads. But yeah, your body knows.
But you leaned into that, truly. Because lots of people say, oh, the body knows, and then I'll let my head take over.
Hey, I still do it too.
Hey, same. But
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up this episode of Grow As We Go with Storytime.
Storytime with Kim, Anthony, Diane.
Samantha, Anthony, and
Diane. Yeah, so we'll catch you on the next episode. If you found parts of this podcast interesting, useful, or at the very least entertaining, I hope that you'll share your takeaways and tag me on social media, or leave a review. And we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.